What's up, everyone? It's Flex coming to you again on this Friday. It's been a week since my last video, which didn't get much traction. I thought it was a pretty good rant, but it was very long, my longest yet at about 16 minutes. So I'm going to try and keep this one short. I will try. Okay, I have some notes in that regard to try and keep me on track. So I made a post earlier this week about the liberals and how everything with the liberals lately seems to be this strange dichotomy where they try and convince everybody that the things that people are concerned about are not a concern, while also trying to convince people that they're addressing the issue. So the one that I was talking about earlier this week was crime. So the liberals have announced for, I don't know, the umpteenth time that they're hiring 1,000 RCMP officers. We've heard this countless times this year. I can't remember how many times, but it's like they just, every couple of weeks or months, they just keep making the same announcement over and over again. So they're trying to convince people that they're going to make our streets safer. But yet at the same time, them and all of their sycophants keep trying to convince us that crime is an issue. Crime is down across Canada. Violent crime is down, yada, yada. So why attack this from two sides? You're attacking it from one side, saying it doesn't exist, but then you're making all these announcements that you're going to deal with the issue. If the issue doesn't exist, then what are you doing? So, and this is a recurring theme with the liberals, where they try and gaslight us and they try and tell us that what we see with our own eyes and what we hear and the data that comes out on certain things, that it's not really true. So this started about a year ago with Christopher Freeland talking about the vibe session. So Canada wasn't in a recession. People weren't struggling. It was a vibe. It was a feeling. It was a feeling. And what have I talked about many times is how the mainstream media in Canada, how they repeat the same talking points as our liberal government. So I've said many times on this platform that I don't watch television, and I don't. But occasionally my wife puts the news on in the morning, and sometimes she forgets to turn the TV off when I go up to get ready for work. And it happened again this week that I went upstairs to get ready for work, and she had the news on, and the anchor woman was talking about this revitalization project that they have going on in Hamilton. And she said that basically people aren't spending money in downtown Hamilton. People aren't going out at night. And she said it's because people have a perception that they don't feel safe. So what is she doing there? She's trying to trivialize people's feelings by calling it a perception. Your feelings are not a perception, okay? Everything that we have is a perception. When we see something, when we hear something, we have a perception of it. But your feelings are not a perception. Your feelings are your feelings. If people don't feel safe on the streets at night, then they don't feel safe. That's not a perception. But why did she say that? And she emphasized the word perception. Oh, people have a perception that they don't feel safe. So what is that? That's a suggestive term so that people feel, oh, maybe I shouldn't feel that way. Maybe I shouldn't feel unsafe in my community. Am I wrong? And no, if you don't feel safe, you don't feel safe. And I've posted about this. Women don't feel safe in major cities in Canada anymore. They don't. My wife will not go to the mall near her work because women, her age, middle-aged women in nice cars, they get carjacked. She doesn't want to be a victim. So she doesn't go to the mall during the day. You know when she goes to the mall? She goes to the mall with me, her big man. So I can be there, make sure she doesn't get carjacked. So, and that's a fact. That's a fact. That's not a perception. It's not a perception that she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't feel safe because, like a dummy, she watches the news. But good for her. At least she knows what's going on in the world. So many people don't. But anyways, and she used to go for walks around the neighborhood. She won't go this time of year because it's dark in the morning. She goes on her treadmill instead. Why? Because she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't feel safe walking around in her own neighborhood in the dark. And that's not a perception if she doesn't feel safe. So, inflation. Sorry for the long pause. I'm consulting notes because I had many instances that I want to talk about, and I didn't want to skip any. Because I do all these videos, I do them in one take. I don't edit anything. It is what it is. If I make a mistake, if I screw up, that's it. I just post it. So, inflation. They keep talking about how inflation is down, how inflation is down. I did an entire video on this a little over a year ago. I reposted it recently because the government constantly talks about wage increases in relation to inflation, but they ignore taxes. They ignore taxes. And for the majority of people working in Canada right now, the biggest tax bracket, the marginal tax rate is around 30%. So that raise that you get, 30% of it goes right to the government in taxes. And they ignore that. They gaslight people and they try and convince people, hey, you're doing great. You're doing great. If you got a 3% raise, inflation was only 2%, you're ahead of the curve. No, you're not. You're not. Okay? The very lowest tax brackets might be even. Anybody who's in the middle of the tax bracket or a higher tax bracket, we're losing out, or at best staying even. But it all depends on what you spend your money on too. If you eat, you're not getting ahead, because by their own estimates, groceries are going to cost the average family in 2026 $1,000 more. They keep talking about inflation. Inflation across the board is still too high. Prices are out of control. They're still going up. I've talked about this many times. Inflation is inflation. If there's any positive inflation, prices are increasing. And prices on groceries are increasing faster than anything else. Okay. What else? Oh, they were posting, and this is a thing. This is a crazy thing about liberals. Do they even read what they post? I have commented so many times this week to Ryan Turnbull, Mark Miller, Melanie Joly. I comment on their posts because they post stuff like it's a win, and if you read the article, you realize it's not a win. So Ryan Turnbull and Mark Miller, they're both a couple of childish, impudent little brats, for lack of a better word. I don't want to swear. I don't like swearing in my videos, but those guys, I can't stand them both. They're just, they're too much. I'll say that. So they both have recently, and Melanie Joly as well, they both recently posted headlines boasting about jobs and GDP and saying, oh, I wonder how the conservatives are going to turn this into something negative. Yeah, guess what? If you read to the first paragraph, you will see that the GDP only increased primarily due to housing resales, which are tanking, the value of them, and government spending. And most of the government spending is being funded by debt. So how is that a good thing? It's not a good thing. They just talk about the GDP numbers, but they don't say what's underlying it. And right in the article, the first sentence says that things are not as rosy as the GDP numbers make it seem. If you dig below the surface, you'll see that it's not a good story. And it's not a good story, but they're posting it and daring conservatives to find the negative. Well, the negative's right there. It's right in the article they posted in the first paragraph. And the other thing is they've been going on the last 2 months about jobs. Saying, oh, we had X number of job growth, X number of new jobs added. But again, if you dig into the numbers, you will see that full-time jobs for the last 2 months have fallen, and for the last quarter have fallen. And what's increasing? What's increasing is part-time jobs in retail and services, because it's the Christmas season. All these jobs are going to be gone in January. But they're gaslighting. They're gaslighting. And the mainstream media never calls this out. They never called out the fake house. They never call out the bragging about the GDP numbers when they could read the article. They wrote the article. Mainstream media wrote the article, but they don't even call out the politicians. What is the mainstream media doing in Canada right now besides accepting handouts and propping up the Liberals? That's it. That's all they do. I think that's it. I'll end on that note. Mainstream media in Canada today, all they do is accept handouts and prop up the Liberal government. That's it for me. Happy Friday. Peace.